coming out too loud for you guys? Okay. And hello to everybody that's watching on Facebook Live. As you know, my office has previously announced some high-profile animal abuse cases. And today I'd like to bring you up to speed on another recent case that involves an alleged animal abuser who has now shot a 2-year-old German Shepherd. And it's important for me to state, and this applies to every case that I'm going to be talking about, that defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Charges are not evidence. So on January 7th, Ruben Lupe Garza, it is alleged, was on a bike when he shot at 2-year-old Simba, S-Y-M-B-A, as the dog was out on a walk with his owner. Simba has had, as a result, to have his right front leg amputated. On January 16th, we filed an indictment against Garza, so he is facing the following charges. 1 count of misconduct involving weapons, 1 count of unlawful discharge of a firearm, disorderly conduct, and intentionally subjecting a domestic animal to cruel mistreatment. All of these are felonies. This leads me to my next point, and it's a point that I've made in the past, which is my concern about prohibited possessors. These are people who, because of their previous convictions, should not be in possession of a weapon. In September of 2022, I updated our prosecution policy to address this type of reoffender, and so it is somebody that, if they are found guilty or if they plead guilty, our requirements are that they go to prison. What this means to the public is this. This office is about holding people accountable and exercising the fullest extent of the law on those who commit crimes time and again. But it's also holding people accountable who are possessing guns, who should not be possessing guns because of their record. I'd also like to take the time to remind you, and I did this 2 weeks ago, but we are still looking for this individual. If we could switch off to the next one. Lester Paul Richmond. Richmond is accused of intentionally subjecting an animal, a husky puppy, to cruel mistreatment. We have a grand jury warrant out for his arrest. And if you know anything about where this individual might be, please call the Scottsdale Police Department at 480-312-TIPS. That is 480-312-8477, if you know where he may be. On another matter, my office, I will remind you, recently announced the indictments on 2 Gilbert cases that were submitted to us. Christopher Fantastic and Eris Arredondo have both been indicted for aggravated assault and aggravated robbery. The arraignment for both defendants is happening tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. And one more thing I'd like to add. As you know, we have been, we're not only about prosecuting cases, but we're about preventing them and educating the community. And so we have held a series of fentanyl forums to educate kids and parents and people who work with kids on the dangers of this poison that is pouring across our border. Again, we have heard that of all of the fentanyl seized by the DEA, half of it is being seized in Arizona. So we are doing this again, but this is the first time that we are doing it in Spanish. And so that will be Tuesday, the February 6th at the Kroc, K-R-O-C, Center in South Phoenix. And so for our Spanish-speaking audience, this panel will convene and relay the dangers of this poison, and the entire thing will be all in Spanish. And with that, I'll take your questions.
County Attorney Mitchell, we are here to talk about the Preston Lord case and going over the process and how this has happened. So a prosecutor was sent out the night of the scene. So they have been a part of this investigation from the very beginning as well, correct?
We have been involved in yes.
Since the night of the attack, and he died 2 days later. The fact that he died 2 days later, did that impact anything with your case? Was anything missed?
Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, before we're going to file charges, one of the things that we're going to look at that is critical that you look at in any homicide case are any attending medical records that would be from the hospital, as well as any report by the medical examiners. So, and that leads me to, let me talk about the process that we're going to follow to review a case that is this complex. As I have told you before, my team is reviewing an enormous amount of investigative material from several different jurisdictions. As I've told you, this involves an over 2,000-page police report. This involves over 2,000, and that's a separate number. Jimmy asked me about that last time. Over 2,000 pieces of digital evidence, and that includes over 600 videos. And just to put this in perspective, if each video was a minute long, and I assure you none of them is a minute long, that's 600 minutes, that's 10 hours of review time. That's just watching it. That's not analyzing it. That's not having to rewind and listen to parts again. So this is a monumental task, but we are working very, very quickly to get this done because I know the community wants answers, and most importantly, Preston Lord's family wants answers about that. So we are working on that, as well as communicating with the police on additional efforts that go on. But I do want to talk about something that has come up that I've seen in some press conferences and some questions about videotapes. And this is no casting no aspersions whatsoever on the media. When you pull video off of social media and use that as part of your story, that's totally appropriate for the media to do. But that's not something that I as a prosecutor can do. And so just to illustrate the point, I did put the rule of evidence up here. So basically what this says is, before I can admit an item of evidence, I have to have evidence that it is what I say it is. Okay, that means I can't just, and the police cannot just pull off videos or have videos sent to them and just say, okay, here's the evidence, here's the picture of what happened, we can just use this. Because what happens is, in court, in order to make that admissible, that video, or a picture, for example, I have to be able to say, put somebody on the stand to say, I either took this video, and this is the video I took, or I have to put somebody on that was there and says, I've reviewed the video, I saw what happened, the video is an accurate reflection of what happened. And so that's really critical. Not only is it critical to do that, but we need to find out whether there are pictures from other angles or video from other angles. Sometimes videos start in the middle of a process because people are kind of observing it, and then they turn their cameras on, and we have to get pictures from before, if they exist, or pictures after to give it context. So this is not simply pulling it off of the internet and then saying we have a case. And the police know that. And so to the extent that there's some maybe misunderstanding with the police investigation, that's part of what takes a while. So it takes us a while too to also make sure that all of that is lined up for us to go to court. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I guess you guys, the prosecutor's office, you have known the evidence as it's coming in, correct? And you're still sifting through all of it, but you guys should be a part of all the big evidence from the beginning.
Well, like I explained last week, it's one thing, and I mean, I've been in this boat as a prosecutor. It's one thing to sit in on a briefing and be briefed and being told, we've interviewed this person and here's the gist of what they have to say. It's another thing entirely to sit down with transcripts and video and piece together how that case is going to look. And so it would be a mistake to think that we are embedded, if you will, with the police such that we are watching every interview and, listening to every video or watching every video as it comes in. That's not how it works. In any case, we're listening, we're aware of the evidence, we're aware of the gist of it, but that doesn't mean we have reviewed it in the detail that we need to review it in order to file charges or make that decision.
When did you start sitting in on the briefings for Preston Lord's case?
I'd have to find out from my attorneys the dates of that. I have regularly, in fact daily now, been briefed on what's going on.
When did it start daily?
Within this past month, obviously, when we got the submittal. I'm trying to remember the date that we got the submittal.
The 29th of December.
29th of December.
And then when did it rise to your level to bring?
It was at my level on the 29th of December, and obviously I was aware of it well before that.
After it stopped, when did it rise to the level where you were a part of this weekly before it moved to daily?
You're misunderstanding me. My attorneys handle the contact directly with the police and the detectives on this. I am briefed on it daily by my attorneys so that I know what's going on in the case.
And then you started going apart daily after the 29th, December 29th.
I am being
Daily briefings.
updated daily by my attorneys and other staff that are working on this case as to what's going on in the case.
Okay, just trying to get background on how long you've been a part of this. Your co-chief of staff told us today, quote, "We didn't realize we had a problem until some of the things began to occur," end quote. What problems have there
Quote's
been in
taken out
this
of
case?
context, Nicole.
What problems have there been in this case? Were mistakes made?
No, and I would have to have the whole context. My person is telling me that that's taken out of context. I would not know just in that isolation what you mean by that, because that's certainly not the case. But I will say this, and I'm just going to get this off my chest because I see three of you are here from the same station, and so this applies to ABC 15. I stand up here every 2 weeks. I stand up here every 2 weeks and I bring you the information that I have, and that to the best of my ability, on the office that prosecutes or sees submittals for over 50,000 cases a year, I give you the information I can. I make my comms team available to you constantly to answer questions, and I'm here to inform the community. When you take that privilege, because not a lot of people do that who are in these types of positions every other week, and you go out and find somebody who has not worked in this office for over 10 years, who never prosecuted a single homicide out of this office, and you have him on your video and in your print saying, if they would have charged it, they would have done so already. Let me tell you what you're doing. First of all, you're calling me a liar. Nothing new for ABC 15. But secondly, what you're doing is you're telling the community that they cannot trust the efforts of this office. No. I'm done. No, you're done. I'll cut your microphone off. You are telling the community that you cannot trust the efforts of this office. This office is pouring in hours and resources to this. But there are also family members out there. There is a real 16-year-old kid who lost his life. There's a real dad. And there's a real stepmom, and I've met with them. And there's a real biological mom. And when I saw your article, when somebody brought it to my attention, because I don't read your stuff, because I'd rather get my news from the nonfiction section. When I saw your article, I called the family up, or the attorneys who represent the family, to make sure they knew that this was not the case. We called your office, and we asked you to fix this. If they would have charged it, they would have done so already. And you stood by your article. I assume that's still your position. You're nodding your head yes, that is your position. That is irresponsible. It is irresponsible to the community, and it is completely harmful to the victims.
County Attorney
You're
Mitchell,
done. Next question from
County
another
Attorney
agency.
Mitchell,
You're
there
done.
are suspects out
Cut
there
off the
who
microphone,
murdered
you're done.
Preston Lord,
You're done.
and they are out there. Why are there not charges? There are murders
You're done.
on the street
That's
right
been
now.
explained to you, Nicole. Sit down, please.
You're done.
Please, that is my last
It's just
question.
been explained to you.
You're done.
County Attorney Rachel Mitchell, there are
Go ask your expert.
people.
You're done.
What was
Next.
What was not
Does
factual
anyone
about
else
that
have
story?
questions they'd like to ask today?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we were trying
Would
to.
you come up to the mic?
Oh, sure. Sorry, I didn't realize that. Sorry, I didn't realize that's how we did things now. Just trying to...
So they can hear you online as well.
Yes, yeah, no. Makes perfect sense, just trying to determine if you and your office view the Gilbert Goons as a criminal street gang. I know it's an ongoing investigation, but obviously that changes the equation.
That's a completely valid question, and it's one that we are definitely looking at. It's still on the table. I'm not prepared to answer that definitively right now, but it is present in our mind to go forward and look at that, or look at it as we're going along, I should say. That's a better way to put it.
Walk us through, how would that impact the charges that would follow?
So if somebody is doing something as part of a criminal street gang, there's kind of two ways that kind of comes into play. One is there's a separate charge about promoting a criminal street gang. The other is it's an enhancement. So an aggravator, okay, let me explain the difference. You have a sentencing range. An aggravator moves the sentence up or down the continuum. An enhancement actually just tacks on years to whatever crime there is. So it is an enhancement, and so that would be something that we would look at in charging the case.
There are some in law enforcement that think that would send a bigger message to the community about this. Is that something that you would agree with?
Well, I'm not about sending messages. I'm about looking at the evidence and finding out what is supported by the evidence. I mean, I can't just file a case because I think it would send a message. But yeah, I agree that would certainly, I think, give people some sense of justice, and we are considering it. But it's just too early right now for me to say definitively we're going to do that or we're not going to do that. But I certainly understand that. People should know that we are taking that into account.
Going with one of your slides,
Which one do you want?
going with the evidence, I just wanted to ask, like you said, you have to corroborate the evidence and everything with those videos. Have you been able to have witnesses come forward to corroborate some of those videos that have come into your office?
Yeah, without going into a lot of detail, yes. And that was one of the things that I think people misunderstood about why the police investigation took so long, was that it was, they can't just, hey, take a look at this website, there's this video. They have to follow up on that and, as the law calls it, authenticate it so that it's admissible in court. And so, yes, they were doing that. Gotcha.
The other thing I want to talk to you about was just different jurisdictions. In regard to Preston Lord, I know it was Queen Creek Police that submitted those charges, but I want to know, can you talk about, in regards to that case, maybe some of the other teen violence, are other jurisdictions involved in the Preston Lord investigation?
Without going too much into the case, what I'll say is this. Obviously, we are aware that there are teen violence issues, obviously, throughout Maricopa County, but right now we're focusing on the East Valley. And in fact, this morning I was meeting with the East Valley Chiefs Association. Everybody is pitching in, handling their jurisdictions, communicating. And so that's going to continue to happen.
Was some of that evidence that was brought into your office, has there been anything that you've had to send back to police departments saying, hey, we need more information on this before we can move forward? We're
not furthering it, so that's one of the options. Like when we get a case, we can either file it or further it back to them for more investigation. We haven't furthered it, but as we're going through, we have the ability, because we're in communication with them, to call up and say, could you follow up on this, so that we can continue to review it. It is still in our office. It is being reviewed. And then they can follow up on it contemporaneous with our review.
And then you talked about just how much evidence came in. We spoke with the Queen Creek Police Chief yesterday, who said, yeah, there's a lot to go through. He's hoping it's going to be weeks, not months, to move forward. But given just the impact that this has on the community wants this to happen sooner rather than later. Can you give us a time frame of when your office can move forward in Preston Lord's case?
We're moving as quickly as we can, and we have devoted an extraordinary amount of resources to this. It would be irresponsible for me to put a timeline on it. What I can tell you is that we are moving very quickly. I have sat and met with parents, Preston Lord's dad and stepmom. I've explained the process to them. They understand. What I would say to the community is we are still actively working on this. We care very much about getting this done quickly, but we care more about getting it done right. And, you know, this is not something that once we do it, if we do it wrong, we can just, you know, course correct. That's not the way the law works. You have one chance to get it right, and we're going to get it right.
The other aspect I wanted to ask you is, you know, like you said, you know, you have a lot of, workers on this. Can you tell us how many people are dedicated to the Preston Lord case from your office?
A lot. But by that I mean we have investigators, we have prosecutors, we have support staff, we have victim advocates, we have criminal analysts, to name but a few, paralegals dedicated to the review of this case.
And then we also know about the other teen violence cases, not just Preston Lord, that have been happening in Gilbert. At this time, can you say if any of those other cases that have, you know, Gilbert police have made arrests in other teen violence cases, are any of them possibly connected to Preston Lord?
I'm not prepared to say that at this point. You know, obviously there may be some overlap, but I want to look at everything before I definitively say one way or the other.
And then just wrapping up my questions here, the route that Queen Creek Police decided to go and submitting the charges to, like they said, they're really focusing on convictions, not just making arrests at this time. Those arrests are hoping to, you know, arrive soon. I just want to know, can you give us any other examples of a police department submitting charges to the county attorney's office, not making those arrests, just anything that we can kind of compare this situation to from previous cases?
Were you here 2 weeks ago?
I was not.
Okay, so I explained there's two ways to come to our office. One is through an arrest and what we would call an in-jail submittal because they're in jail and they've been arrested. The other is what we call a basket case, meaning charges are submitted for us to review and then the arrest is made later. Generally speaking, basket cases make up about 40% of the cases that we get in this office. 60% are in jail.
How many of those, and the only reason why I ask is because when you go out in the community, they say, hey, we want these people off the streets right now.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, you know, any examples in regards to a homicide case where police submitted charges, those arrests weren't made right away?
I know there are. I would have to look up the names for you so that I make sure I don't misspeak on that. But yes, there are.
Thank you.
Yes. Stephen.
Hey.
Hey.
I've just got one Preston Lord question, and then I have some other questions to ask you. But, you know, in Phoenix, I think there are like 250 murders a year. I don't know what it is for the county. And there are probably like, I've been told 20,000 cold cases for Phoenix alone or something like that. It's a huge number.
Okay.
They only have 3 people who work it.
The cold cases, you mean?
The cold cases.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What do you think accounts for the media's obsession with this particular murder of Preston?
Well, I mean, I definitely think, I mean, anytime somebody underage, a minor, a juvenile dies, I mean, I think that plucks at our heartstrings even, you know, louder than the normal case. I think there's a frustration there that they want to make sure that they're heard. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that they understand that they are being heard. I think it also strikes to the heart of so many parents who, you know, they send their kid to a Halloween party or what they think is a Halloween party and he dies. And it's heartbreaking. And so I think that's captured the minds and hearts of so many people in the East Valley and really across Maricopa County and the state.
You are expending a lot of effort and, you know, getting these regular briefings and stuff. You've met with the family. You don't always meet with the families of murder victims.
That's true. I don't. I sometimes do. I don't always.
And I remember when I asked you about Jake Kelly's murder,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe someone else had asked, you know, that she, you know, the mother of the victim wanted to meet with you, and you said, I don't normally meet with,
Mm-hmm.
you know, victims' relatives. That's something that, you know, the prosecutors do.
Mm-hmm.
So don't you think it's a little unfair to, you know, put all of this weight on this one murder when you have, at least in this city, 250 other murders and
Well,
family members grieving and children killed too? So
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
Just may not be white kids from Gilbert or Queen Creek.
Well, you know, I would ask you to look at all of our other recent efforts. You know, one of the attorneys that's working on this case, for example, tried 7 cases last year. We can look up what those were for. We just got a 37-year sentence on somebody who murdered her child. So we do care about other children, as you know very well. I spent the vast majority of my career protecting children, so of all colors, and it doesn't matter to me. That said, there are times when I do meet with the family, and sometimes that involves because they've asked to after they've talked to the attorneys, and they're not hearing, what they need to hear, and so I will meet with them. So it's not something that I've not done in the past. But in this case, when there is so much misinformation that is being spread out there to where this family is grieving at the loss of a son, and they're hearing person after person say to them, nobody cares, nobody's going to do anything, nobody's going to file charges. I think it needs to come from the elected county attorney to say, we are here, we're working on it, we care, to the small extent that it can ease their mind.
And just one last follow-up on that subject. Don't you think the media is basically driving this at this point? You turn on the television, it's on every night.
Yeah.
I suspect that that's part of the reason why your office is expending so many resources on this particular murder.
No, I would disagree with that. Well, that's a 2-part question. Is the media driving this? The media is certainly reporting on this a lot. And like I said, what the media chooses to report on, that's their business, and this is not an unworthy case to report on. As far as resources, we have a 2,000-page police report. That is extraordinary. This is an extraordinary case. It's extraordinary because there were so many people who potentially were witnesses that you don't normally have that kind of piece. And that requires additional resources. It's not that, this is, a special case and we're not going to dedicate resources to other cases. As I said, that attorney, one of the attorneys working on this, tried 7 other cases last year. But this is extraordinary. And just, to put this into context of a 2,000-page police report, Tom Clancy's novel, The Hunt for Red October, was 387 pages. And we all know how thick that was. So this is like over 5 times as long. And it is very detailed, going through it and seeing how we can, match up the evidence that we need to proceed. So we're being careful.
I had a couple of questions about the death penalty. Alabama is set, I guess the Supreme Court just today cleared the way for Alabama to be the first state that executes someone using nitrogen gas. And I was wondering what your thoughts on that were, considering the fact that, I know we probably had to change the Constitution apparently, because it's in the lethal injection as part of the state constitution, but wouldn't that alternative, something like nitrogen gas, eliminate some of the concerns with lethal injection?
Potentially, yes. Obviously, I spoke last year at my frustration and just complete disagreement with the governor's moratorium on the death penalty. She clearly has acted outside the scope of her authority to do that.
Wait a second, I'm sorry. You said that before, but
I meant it before.
The Arizona Supreme Court upheld her power to do that, didn't it?
No, they did. No, to single-handedly put a moratorium on it, no. And what they did, we can go into the details of the case, but no, they did not do that. One of the things that I know is a frustration, however, of having lethal injection is the compounding of the various chemicals that are used. Would it get rid of that problem? Yes. But, we're talking about a hypothetical situation in the future where I haven't seen the actual page of what it's going to read like. So I don't want to really comment on that. But I acknowledge that there are things that it might solve.
Yeah. And could you, I guess, in abbreviated form, give us just a general idea of how your office comes to the decision to pursue the death penalty in a murder case?
Sure. Every first-degree murder case committed by somebody who at the time is 18 or older is reviewed by a committee, and the committee makes a recommendation to me. But the ultimate decision is solely mine, And the things that I'm looking for are these. One is I'm looking at, because of the drawn out nature, protracted nature of litigation in a death penalty case, how this evidence will hold up over those decades. Secondly, and probably most importantly, is I'm looking for the worst of the worst. As a 31-year prosecutor now, I have a lot of experience. I've seen many, many, many homicides, and I can look at the continuum. I think I'm in a good place to see what that worst of the worst is, and understand that I take that as seriously, more seriously than anything else. It is the most serious thing that I do. So that's generally, in an abbreviated fashion, how we go about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Just one question for you today, County Attorney Mitchell, about the Lord investigation. Can you tell us, through your investigation, if you've been able to make a connection with the so-called Gilbert Goons and the death of Preston Lord?
I don't know. Obviously, that has come up during the investigation. I don't know what level of connection you're asking for. We'll have more information on that later on that we can go into.
You can't confirm whether you've made a connection yet or not?
I can confirm that it has come up during the investigation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
County Attorney Mitchell, have you considered whether or not Preston Lord could be a death penalty case, or has that idea been taken off the table? Obviously, we know that some of the people are adults who charges have been recommended for.
It would be premature to talk about that. What I would say is nothing's off the table at this point. But obviously, juveniles are not, people who are juveniles at the time, even if they're prosecuted as adults, are not eligible.
Clearly.
But I'm not gonna step outside of my normal process and opine on that. That wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay. Another procedural kinds of question for you. You've said multiple times, basically, that there's one chance to get it right here in the Preston Lord case, and that kind of puts an all or nothing aspect to it. However, your office does have options, right? Of the 7 potential suspects submitted, you don't have to charge all of them at the same time. You could charge some of them who maybe have more evidence or better evidence first, and then see if information develops on the other ones. Or there could be lesser charges on certain people than others. And the standard for a grand jury indictment or direct complaint is different than an ultimate conviction. You're not going to try this case tomorrow. There's time that more evidence or information might be developed over months or years down the road, especially after people are behind bars. So what do you say about that? Is there an all or nothing real mentality here, or are you looking at these other options to possibly charge some, not all, originally, or those kinds of things?
Let me break that down into a multitude of questions that you asked there. You've just now given me the idea for my next legal lesson for 2 weeks from now, which is to talk about Bruton issues. You can look that up. I'm sure Wikipedia has a page on that. What I would say is this. That is something that we always consider when we have multiple defendant cases. We look at, do we charge them together? Do we charge them apart? This is speaking generally. This is not speaking about this case. Do we, see if one wants to offer evidence? Do we see if another one wants to offer evidence? At this point, though, I'm just going to say you're going to have to, and I know you're not, but you're going to have to trust the experience level of the attorneys in this office who are reviewing this and that are going to make a decision, or at least a recommendation, about how we should proceed in this case. And it may not be very satisfying that it's not being done like that. But again, to your second part of the question, no, I'm not in a situation where I can just lock them up and hope the evidence comes together. That's happened in the past, not under my regime, and you guys reported on it pretty extensively, if I recall. You have to go into a case with a reasonable likelihood of conviction. I can't rest on the legal thing that, well, if I go to a grand jury, all I have to show is probable cause, and then I'm just going to hope that I have a reasonable likelihood of conviction. That's not how it works. That's not ethical, and we're not going to do it that way.
Okay. I had a chance to talk to Queen Creek Police Chief Randy Bryce yesterday, and he did acknowledge the community frustration that's been going on here. At what point does someone involved in this case say, we wish that we could have done something differently, or apologize to the community? And in this context, right, there are teenagers in the Southeast Valley who are going to school every day afraid and going to their lives every day afraid because they believe that there are murderers walking amongst them at school, in the community, at the store, at the park on the weekend. And if they were to speak up against them, they desperately fear that they could be retaliated against. So what do you say beyond, like, we understand you're frustrated, to these families and these witnesses and the victims, not, in some of these other cases, who believe that they are in imminent danger with these people still out on the streets?
What I would say is this. It will do you no good if we go so fast that we don't do it well. The police are listening. The police are taking reports on this. Do call the police. Don't hesitate to call the police. But it doesn't help to have rumors and innuendo spread around to the police, because they can't act on that. We need people to come forward and report if this type of thing is happening. But gets back to my earlier point. It doesn't help. And I mean, I'll say this as sincerely as I can. It doesn't help when a news agency is out there saying there's no way they're going to file. What does that say? It just doesn't help people's confidence, and they can be confident we are working this case. That's what I would say.
I appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. This is Hector with Univision. It's a different topic. I'm working on a case out of Pima regarding animal cruelty. You probably heard about the doctor that was recently arrested for doing C-sections on animals and doing artificial inseminations on 13 dogs, 3 rabbits. Her mugshot is out there now, but I know your office has been very strong in pushing laws concerning animal cruelty as well. Do you think that could be happening here in the Valley? And yeah, that's my first question.
I hesitate to talk about a case that's not mine and I haven't read and any of those things. But what I would say is this, because of police shortages, I know a lot of agencies did have to, cut down on their dedicated animal abuse efforts. And one of the things that I did last year, or actually it was in 2022, was I hired a detective that is statewide known for her ability to work on animal abuse cases. And it is a subject near and dear my heart as well. And so we have been loaning her out, for lack of a better term, to various agencies. And she's going to probably kill me for this, but if any other agency outside Maricopa County needs help, we would certainly try to make her available for that as well. Because I know the correlation between animal abuse, and if that's not enough in and of itself, with domestic violence, with child abuse, etc.
County Attorney, I'm sorry to interrupt you. County Attorney's going to have to go pretty quick. So.
Yeah, I've got to.
Last question, I guess, and I knew you were probably not going to be able to comment on that, so I do appreciate you putting some input. What's the update on SB 1047? Is that moving forward?
Remind me which one that is.
SB 1047, remember that we were at the Arizona Humane Society recently?
Yes, okay. As far as I know, it's still, on track. I don't know exactly where it is in the legislature. So for the viewing public, what 1047 is, do I have that right?
Yes.
1047 is the bill that has been offered to make terms clearer in the animal abuse statute so that there's less ambiguity that can be exploited to try to get out of charges. There's also another bill, and we can get you the number that I talked about at the Arizona Humane Society, that is to, what happened was when they were adding the more serious form of animal abuse, they forgot to add it to the domestic violence statutes. And so the lesser form is added, but the greater form is not added. And so Representative Barbara Parker is running that bill. So there's 2 bills out there.
I appreciate it, Tim. Thank you.
Any other final questions, not from gentlemen?
Question isn't about the Preston Lord investigation, it's about teen violence.
Okay.
It's not.
This is my last question. And I'm not kidding. We do have a budget presentation, so.
Okay, very
Okay.
quickly, we've seen 5 teens arrested in Maricopa County involving teen violence in the East Valley. Many of those cases out of Gilbert, we still haven't seen some arrests with many of their cases. Is that concerning to your office, and how closely are you working with those departments as they work through this teen violence large issue?
We are regularly in communication with them about that. Obviously, we're concerned about it. And kind of to circle back a little bit to Stephen, your questions about the coverage, a lot of stuff isn't covered. And so we are dealing with a lot of matters in Maricopa County. And this kind of goes back to something that I've been talking about in these press conferences, which is the explosion of juvenile violence, but specifically, which is not our situation here in Preston Lord's case, specifically related to gun violence. And so we have asked the legislature to run a bill related to that to hopefully curb that somewhat. But it is a huge concern to me, and we've actually been talking to the administrative office of courts about it, because they run what the penalty structure looks like, if you will, for the courts in juvenile court. And we're also looking at our own policies to make sure that they properly address just how serious this is. So with that, I gotta go.
Thank you all.
Okay.